Coming up on Theater Talk.
New York City itself has undergone a sea change since the 80s when you came.
It certainly has.
My one and only, because you were right, I believe, at the Marquee Theater at a
Yeah.
time when Times Square was not the Disneyland or the Disney World that it is.
No, it was pretty scuzzy. It was pretty scuzzy, and 8th Avenue was you know, sex cinemas and all that kind of thing. 42nd Street was a naughty, bawty, sporty 42nd Street.
Right.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
She took the ring of me, I'll none of it.
Come, sir. You peevishly threw it to her, and her will is it should be so returned.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, you have brought a friend of yours today, and I am so delighted.
Indeed, there is a fine revival of Twelfth Night on Broadway now, starring Mark Rylance, who's been a guest on this show many times. But it brings to New York, making his Broadway debut, I believe, one of my favorite actors, writers, and television personalities. Mr. Stephen Fry, welcome to Theater Talk.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Congratulations on playing Malvolio in Yellow Tights.
Thank you.
And it is your Broadway debut, am I not mistaken?
Yes, as an actor, it's my Broadway debut.
You wrote, of course.
In 1986, yes, I wrote on the book of Me and My Girl, which was a musical that ran here for several years with Robert Lindsay. So that was my first taste of Broadway.
And has it changed in the almost 25 years now when you first came to New York?
Certainly has. I have to say, the fact that you could read a very small fine print edition of the New York Times in Times Square now at midnight is really distressing. I miss the neon.
You know, the New York City itself has undergone a sea change since the 80s when you came.
It certainly has.
My one and only, because you were right, I believe, at the Marquee Theater at a time when Times Square was not the Disneyland or the Disney World that it is.
No, it was pretty scuzzy. It was pretty scuzzy, and 8th Avenue was you know, sex cinemas and all that kind of thing. 42nd Street was a naughty, bawty, sporty 42nd Street,
Right.
And of course, as always, there's a mixture. But it was like the novelist John Ricci, but it was male hustlers, it was drug addicts, it was not a safe or comfortable environment for a family to go to. On the other hand, now it is just so clean and squeaky and filled with, you know, Arby's and places that you can see anywhere in America, that something has gone out of it. If only people could just meet halfway, the scuzzy and the acceptable. Then
well, we have a new very liberal mayor here in New York, so if he puts into play the sort of David Dinkins policing tactics, it might go back a little bit.
I think he should bring in lots of rent boys and hustlers. I think it would make it a much nicer place.
Restore 8th Avenue to its glory days. All right, I think I complimented you before on your performance as Malvolio, because this is a very light, merry romp, this play, Twelfth Night.
Yes.
And the production is done with a very deft and light touch. Except for the very end, when you leave these ridiculous people after, as we know in the play, they have really tortured you and humiliated you.
Yes.
And I think your line is, "I will be revenged on the pack of you."
On the whole pack of you,
on the whole, and there's a shift in tone when.
Absolutely, it's very interesting that Shakespeare often does it, and there are characters who aren't joined into the sort of family reconciliation that the comedies tend to provide, especially the festive comedies like you know, As You Like It and so on. You could argue it was Shakespeare's realism. You could argue it was that Shakespeare genuinely didn't like Malvolio and didn't want to give him a happy ending. He doesn't really give Sir Toby Belch much of a happy ending either.
True.
There's a sort of Falstaffian character in the play. It's a magnificent gender comedy because we're playing it in what's called the original practice style, which was developed by Mark Rylance and Jenny Chiramani, the designer, both of the sets and of the costumes, and she knows more about medieval costume, Renaissance costume, right up to 18th century costume than anyone else in the world, and has her own school and college. And for example, it's a small and silly detail, but the buttons on my front, right on my peas cod, as it's called, were cast for this production in a button mould that's in the Bath Historical Costume Museum. And the button mould, we know, was made in 1600. And we also know that the play Twelfth Night was first performed on Twelfth Night in the Middle Temple, which is a law court, a hall, medieval hall, in 1602. So I said to Jenny, sort of jokingly, if the button mould had been made in 1603, would you have used it? She said, no. She was shocked at the idea. You can have things that are old. People might, you know, your pullover might have seen a few seasons. I'm not saying it has, but it might have done. But what you can't do is wear one that's not yet been designed.
Yeah, precisely.
What are those paunches that even the children in Richard III are wearing these costumes with
Yes.
paunches? What's that?
I think the idea is to suggest essentially a kind of prosperity, that you can eat well. And also it shows off material. Colour. We take colour so for granted now. It wasn't really until the 18th century and the great trading expeditions from Britain and from Holland and the other imperial nations, when dyes were indigo from India and other such things, and all the aquamarines and the lapis lazuli and so on, and these really extraordinary colours arrived, that that ordinary people could see colour. Colour was reserved for church windows and indeed the painting of churches, just as it had been Greek temples, which we see as white, but
they were painted.
They were painted. People's lives were drab; they were mud-coloured. The only dyes they had were earth dyes, ruddocks and things like that. Very, very sort of rusty browns and very sort of dull yellows and greens. And the richer you were, the more you could afford to send out fleets and bring back, you know, just as in the house that Malvolio is steward of, he would have had the key to the sugar cellar, sugar safe. Sugar was kept in a safe because it was so valuable. And it's very interesting to plunge yourself into that time. I mean, actors always go on and on about how they research their material, and you think, oh, Shakespeare, come on, you don't need to do that. But we all went on a little trip to Hatfield House, which is the seat of the Marquis of Salisbury, and that family has served Britain for hundreds of years. The Cecils is their surname, spelt Cecil, but naturally being British, pronounced Cecil. And they were also the Earls of Burghley, and then the Marquises of Salisbury. And 2 generations served Queen Elizabeth, and then they carried on serving under James. And the very last one was the first Prime Minister of the 20th century, the Marquis of Salisbury, the one who fired Winston Churchill's father.
Right.
And and their house, Hatfield House, is one of the best preserved Elizabethan houses in the country. And it contains lots of portraits, of course, of past Burghleys, but also of past servants, including stewards. So there was a steward who was from exactly the same time as Malvolio, and Jenny and I based him on that steward,
portrait,
who had a white stick and had this sort of beard with a little point and this sort of peacock, was very black in colour. He's referred to as a Puritan in the play, and it'll interest you this. We have next week, in fact. We have a celebration on Thursday. We call it Thanksgiving, and we give thanks for getting rid of all these Puritans from Britain, and we celebrate the fact that we don't have them anymore.
Going back to the color thing, though, what is the significance then of the color yellow that Malvolio wears in the yellow tights when he is duped into thinking that Olivia loves him?
He's a very sober man. He would only ever think of wearing black. He is, that she uses the word sober. He is sober and solemn and suits well a woman of my melancholy. And Maria, who fools him into thinking that she's in love with him, that Olivia's in love with him, says, to prove you love me and that you've got this letter, and there's a little symbol between us, you know, wear some yellow stockings and wear them in the cross-gartered style. And Mariah, as the chambermaid of Olivia, happens to know that she loathes yellow stockings, which were presumably 2 years, you know, fashion ago, or they wear them in, you know, in Florence or something, and she hates the cross. The cross. So it's just a more terrible way to humiliate the poor man.
When you say that they invented the practice style, what's the Mark Rylance invented?
The original practice style.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that you attempt scholastically, as well as you can, to put on the plays in exactly the way that Shakespeare and his company would have put them on. That's because we have the gift, the great gift from the great American Sam Wanamaker, who was an unwilling gift. There's a marvelous book called Hitler's Unwilling Gift, which is about Jewish scientists who came to live in Britain, between them won something like 42 Nobel Prizes, and I'm sure in America even more came over. And another unwilling gift we had was the unwilling gift of McCarthyism. So we had people like Joseph Losey and Sam Wanamaker and a whole series.
Carl Foreman.
Carl Foreman, series of actors and writers who worked, because they couldn't work in America anymore, worked in Britain. And Sam came over to Britain and was a loved and busy actor, but he loved his Shakespeare, and he went to the Royal Shakespeare Company. He said, "Why isn't there a Globe Theatre like Shakespeare's?" And everyone said, "Oh, I suppose there's one in Toronto, isn't there?" They said, "Yeah, but there should be one on the river where Shakespeare
the original was."
Yeah. And people said, "Oh, but you have to pull down car parks." Yeah, but they're ugly car parks. Oh, and he just pushed and he pushed and he pushed. And it's a very sad thing that it was 3 years before he died that
he never saw it, did
he? He didn't see it completely finished. I mean, he saw that it and knew that it would be finished.
Yeah. And how successful has it been in London?
Fantastically successful. It sells out every single performance. And by no means is every performance in the original practice style. There are plenty of modern dress performances. It's by no means prescriptive. But they thought, well, since we have this space, it's very interesting as a matter of scholarship and as a matter of learning more about theatre to see how these plays work when you have the yard where the groundlings stand, and you have these 3 tiers of more expensive seats in the daylight, with no artificial lighting, in exactly the clothes that would have been worn, with exactly the kind of props that have been worn, right down to the right types of wood, exactly the
and the same sort of special effects that would have been used.
Such as they were, exactly. Mark Rylance, who was artistic director for that period, and Jenny and Claire, Mark's wife, who is a musician, as it happens, is a specialist in 17th century music, discovered that it was like taking the varnish off a painting. Extraordinary things happened, most particularly in the comedies. It works with the tragedies very well, but with the comedies there is an amazing relationship with the audience that takes place. You realize that almost every soliloquy, certainly, but even exchanges amongst people, you can just turn and look at the audience and go, do you agree? and it just works. There's no other way an actor would have done it.
Right.
It must be how it was done.
And there must have been, I mean, I don't know if we have any record of this, but you would think, I've been a couple of times there, and you see, of course, the groundlings and all. People would have been speaking to the actors, talking back to the stage. There must have been, a deviation from the text, if you will, on a fairly regular basis, especially in the comedies.
The magic comes from this being an all-male production.
Yeah.
I don't think all productions of Twelfth Night should be all male. Good heavens, I saw Judi Dench, and that would be an experience I will never forget. But the extra level of gender confusion is just fantastic. And you have to imagine, so they're these boy actors dressed as women, and the audience accepts them as women when they first see
And they're
them.
quite beautiful as women.
Yes, so Sam Barnett, say, who is the most important in that sense, in that she's the one who changes gender.
She loves me. Sure.
She arrives. Sam Barnett was Tony nominated for his performance in The History Boys.
Right, that's right.
He
Yeah.
played,
Fine actor.
Played Posner, wonderful actor. And so he comes up as a woman and says, "What country is this. She's been shipwrecked and she's been saved. She doesn't know what she's going to do. She's heard of Illyria. She's heard of the Duke of Orsino. She thinks maybe she'll act as a page boy for him or something like that, until she can make her estate known and she can get in touch with her family and her her fortune and everything else, because she's alone in Illyria and it's not safe for a girl to be there. And she has fortunately washed aboard her brother's clothes, a twin pair to the fact that to the clothes that his brother drowned in. So she puts those on and goes to work as a boy, but we know she's a girl. And and she falls in love with Orsino, the Duke Orsino, who thinks he's a boy, so that she can't express it. She then goes as an emissary for Orsino, who's in love with Olivia, who's played by Mark Rylance, who falls in love with Sam Barnett, who is, we know, a girl, but pretending to be a boy, and has called himself Cesario. So it's really, it's nutty. I mean, it's whoa, but it's fantastic comedy. And then at the end, when you see, for the first time on stage together, the brothers come on like that, and then what? How? And
they look very much alike.
They look so alike.
Very much
They really
alike.
do.
What's been
Joseph Timms, yeah.
cleverly done is in the makeup sphere is that Olivia has the makeup not unlike Elizabeth I.
Yes. Yep.
And in fact, 1602 was the last full year of Elizabeth I's life, and everyone knew she wore white paint and very red lipstick, and there is a reference to Olivia's beauty as being red and white truly blend, and the boy is in white and red as well, Sebastian, played by Joseph Timms, and when Viola dresses as Cesario, she's the same. So it all kind of works.
You get a sense too of, and I know you're a historian and a scholar of a lot of this period, but the Duke is in love with Sam Burnett.
Yeah.
He's still in love. He's in love with Sam Burnett even as a man, though. When Sam Burnett's pretending to be a man, there's a homosexual longing.
Well, he's not turning into a man. He's turning back into. He's revealing that he is in fact Viola.
Yeah.
But we know he's a boy. But while he was a boy,
there's
there was a very
much so, and you wonder if when the Duke is going to get Viola as a woman, is he going to be as happy with her as a woman as he might have been if he had been a state of man?
I often think Malveau's real revenge is the fact that those couples are married. I think they're the most dysfunctional potential couples.
Perhaps their attraction transcended gender.
I want to ask, what would have been the sort of the view, the acceptance or the lack of same-sex relationships in Shakespeare's time? I mean, clearly Shakespeare is playing with this.
Well, we can speculate that there was the same percentage of people who were attracted to their own gender then as there are now. We know from the first section of Shakespeare's sonnets that are addressed to a boy that he is absolutely enthralled to the boy's beauty, when we don't know from the word boy how old that means. We hope, we trust that it's not a pederastic age. We think probably not. Oscar Wilde wrote a wonderful essay called A Portrait of Mr. W.H.
Yes.
The sonnets are dedicated, it says, to Mr. W.H., the only ensuing begetter of these sonnets. And people have worked out whom that might be. Some people think it's the Earl of Southampton, whose name was Henry Wriothesley, where's spelt H.W., and he's put them backwards. But Oscar wrote a wonderful essay suggesting it was an actor called Willie Hughes, because there are an enormous number of puns about Will and Hugh. Hugh as in colour, as in makeup, as in acting, and Will as in Will himself, of course, and another Will, and they're sort of, he plays with the words Will and the words Hugh, and he does a quite close reading Shakespeare, which is Wilde, which is rather witty. It's pure speculation, of course.
Right.
The Elizabethan era didn't condone homosexuality, but it wasn't as brutal about it as later eras became, and previous eras had been. There was a fashion for effeminacy in men. Nicholas Hilliard was a great portraitist of miniatures, and men were very, they were very much with makeup, very tightly hosed, very effete, and Shakespeare sometimes makes fun of them. Osric in Hamlet, for example. But yeah, and the fact that I mean, you just think how good these actors must have been. Now, imagine there's a boy who's good enough to play Cleopatra. We say boy, you know, you've seen from Sam Barnett, he can play Cleopatra very easily, and Sam Barnett is, you know, what, 30? So I'm not saying boy in the sense of child.
Eileen Atkins insisted to us that the boys in the actual Globe had to be 15 or younger.
No, I don't know that that's true at all.
You don't think so?
No, absolutely not. There's a lot of argument about that. Some of the parts they played may have been 15 or younger, but I think to play Cleopatra, I think there is. But the word boy is used certainly of actors in Shakespeare, and the example that freaks me out is that Cleopatra explains that she's not going to be taken by Octavius at the end of Anti-Cleopatra. She's not going to be taken prisoner, because if she is, she'll be taken in tribute down through the streets of Rome, have things pelted at her, being called a whore and all the rest of it. And so she says, the way she explains it, she says, I will not have some future Cleopatra buoy my greatness in the posture of a whore. So she's using the word boy as a verb, which is brilliant in Shakespeare anyway. So for all those pedants out there who think that turning nouns into verbs is bad, it's part of what made Shakespeare so great. But anyway, so you've got a boy actor saying to an audience and expecting them not to snigger, I will not have some future Cleopatra buoy my greatness in the posture of a whore. You think, wow, how good he must have been.
Really?
Or the boy who played Lady Macbeth.
Yeah.
We don't. It's interesting, but you know, as it were, paleontology. We can tell from some historical documents that the ages of adolescence altered in cycles, quite narrow cycles. So, for example, Haydn's voice didn't break till he was 18, I think, when he was a chorister. But a few earlier ages, we know some of the Plantagenet and Angevin kings had body hair when they were 12. So it's diet, it's all goodness knows what.
If you're in flush times or bad times.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. We certainly know, of course, famously, Romeo and Juliet were young teens when they fell in love and married, and that was perfectly normal. And we know that plenty of kings and queens married at that age and had issue at ages that we would now consider utterly unacceptable or inappropriate.
Well, we got to wrap it up, Stephen. It's been delightful chatting with you, and I must say you're a very brave actor to share the stage with Mark Rylance.
I totally enjoy it. It's a thrill. You never know what he's going to do next. But I sometimes do things that he doesn't know what I'm going to do next, and he gives me a life lesson. So he keeps one on one's toes, and he's very much a company man, and we all love him, and we all love each other, and we're all very happy. And I know how ick-making that sounds, but it is true, and it makes theatre, makes doing the same job every day all the more exciting.
And it's certainly that the joy and the merriment you take in performing the play comes across to the audience watching the play.
Thank you for saying that.
Twelfth Night at the Belasco Theatre, and it's in rep with Richard III, which you are not in.
That's right.
Was there no role for you in Richard III?
No, I was cast late. The whole story behind that, it was my row with Mark after I'd seen him in Jerusalem, because he's an anti-Stratfordian and doesn't believe that Shakespeare, well, he's not really, but he pretends to be. He thinks that De Vere wrote the works of Shakespeare.
Oh, he doesn't believe that Shakespeare did.
Yeah, he pretends not to. Anyway, I think just to annoy me. And he said, well, why haven't you, if you know so much about Shakespeare, why haven't you ever played in it? I said, I played, I think, in about 7, 8 productions at university, but I've never done it professionally. And he said, if you were to dip your toe in, what would it be? And I said, well, probably something like Malvolio. And he looked across at his wife and said, you do know we're doing it next year at the Globe? And I said, no. He said, and we haven't cast it. I said, well, crikey. He said, shake my hand now, and it's yours. And I looked across at my partner, and he went, yeah. So we shook on it. And I called my agent the next morning. I said, "You never guess what's happened." And he said, "You're playing Malvolio next year," because Mark's
Don't say major. Boy, he really got you.
fine too. Yeah, he really did.
Well, it brought you to New York. And you...
But it does mean that if you want to see Richard III,
Yeah.
you should go on Wednesday evenings or Saturday afternoons. The other 6 performances are Twelfth Night.
Right. Stephen Fry, it's been great having you as guest on Theater Talk, and have fun while you're in New York.
Thank you both very much.
Thank
Pleasure.
How now, Malvolio? Oh. Smilest thou? I sent for thee upon a sad occasion.
Sad, lady? I could be sad. It does make some obstruction in the blood, this cross-gartering, but what of that? If it please the eye of one, then 'tis with me, as the very true sonnet is. Please one, and please all.
Why, how now, man? What is the matter with thee?
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.